Jack Henry Abbott was born on the 21st of January 1944 in Oscoda, Michigan. His life started badly. His father was a well-known drunk who was an American-Irish soldier who met his prostitute Chinese mother while on tour with the army. She fell pregnant and the pair were not together to raise the child as a traditional American family. He was taken into care and was fostered by many different families, all of whom noticed that Abbott was a strange child who would ultimately grow into an unhinged man. By the young age of 12, he was sent to an institute for delinquent boys in Utah after a spate of stealing and general misdemeanours, and a charge for not settling into foster care, which was back then an arrestable offence. He spent a while there and, as always, was released at the age of 18, as he was now an adult. And, without a job or a home to call his own, he again resorted to criminal activities. He broke into a local clothing store and stole cheques that he eventually tried to cash after he made them out to himself. He was then arrested again. This was in 1963, and he was sentenced to serve the 5-year maximum term for forgery in the Utah State Penitentiary in Draper. Another string to add to his already growing bow of crimes. While he was serving those 5 years, he committed yet more serious crimes. He murdered. His victim was by the name of James Christensen. Abbott concealed a homemade weapon and stabbed Christensen to death and attempted the life of Christensen's cellmate. There are conflicting stories for the reason he murdered. One story was he had to fend off Christensen, who was known for sexually attacking men in prison. Another story was that Abbott killed because Christensen told guards about the contraband he had in his cell. But the story that was told by Abbott himself about the incident was in one of his best-selling books, and that was "A man who kills another man in prison earns the most respect." None of these stories have been substantiated by any of the men involved. Abbott had to face a penalty for murder and was given the concurrent 3 to 20 year sentence, so would almost certainly be in prison for the foreseeable future. However, Abbott didn't think that this was the place for him, and knowing that he could spend another 20 years in there, he hatched a plan to escape. He succeeded in 1971. He made his way to Colorado, and in usual Abbott form, instead of keeping his head down, trying to stay out of prison, he did the exact opposite. He robbed a bank armed with a weapon in Denver. His taste of freedom lasted no longer than a month. He was back in jail. His sentence was an extra 19 years to be served on top of the 20 years he had not finished serving. He was sent to the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. True to form, Abbott kept getting into trouble while in prison and caused a lot of trouble for the guards working at the prison, and spent a lot of time in solitary confinement, something which is usually feared by inmates, but not Abbott. He thrived in there, reading book after book after book, then igniting his love for reading, and then in turn writing. Abbott began writing to an author by the name of Norman Mailer. Abbott spent time reading his books in there, and Mailer agreed to publishing the letters the pair had written, and the book which made it onto the best-selling list was called The Belly of the Beast, Memoirs from Prison. Mailer spent time speaking to the parole board on behalf of Abbott. Many people thought this would be in vain. However, in 1981, the parole board gave Abbott a hearing, and with Mailer's support, he was released from prison. There were appeals from many to stop this from happening. Even psychiatrists stated their case, saying that Abbott was too dangerous to be allowed back into society, and expressed the fact they thought he was not rehabilitated and would commit further crimes, and maybe even murder again. But despite all of this, he was now a free man. Mailer gave Abbott a job at his publishing house in New York as a secretary. This was Abbott's chance to make his life better. He had digs at a Salvation Army house and was rubbing shoulders with the stars in the publishing world. But this was a life far from the norm for Abbott, and he would rather be on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, a rather seedy and run-down area of New York, hanging around with career criminals and meeting many different ladies. On the morning of July the 18th, 1981, a mere 6 weeks since Abbott was paroled, he had spent much of the night in the company of Veronique St. Andre and Susan Roxas. At around 5 in the morning, they made their way to a small cafe on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan called the Binnibon. Drinking and laughing, the trio were having a great time. It was only when Abbott needed the toilet that this all changed. He asked the young 22-year-old waiter called Richard Aden where the toilet was. He explained it was a small premises and many people used the outside alleyway. Abbott was not happy with Aden's response, and he made his way to the staff-only toilet, where he was asked not to enter, as it was for staff only, and was led to the previously offered alleyway. Abbott felt that he was being made a fool of in front of the ladies, and he proceeded to start an argument with Aden. This argument quickly escalated, and Abbott stabbed him to death. Aden was a part-time actor, hoping to make the big time, and took work to get him by in his father-in-law's cafe. He was only meant to be working for a few hours to cover a shortness of staff. Abbott fled the scene and went into hiding. He tried to contact Mailer, but was not successful. He travelled by bus across the US and made his way across the Mexican border, bribing an official due to no paperwork. But his time there was short-lived. Due to his lack of speaking Spanish, he left Mexico and went back to US soil and to the state of Louisiana, a relatively small but highly populated state, hoping that working in the oil fields would leave him safe. This was, however, not the case. He was recognised from many of the news feeds on the wanted criminal, and the newly named Jack Eastman was found and arrested on the 23rd of September 1981. He did not put up a fight for his arrest, but when he was told that the book he had jointly published was a huge selling book, he was shocked. The hunt for this killer lasted 2 months. Abbott was held on remand until his trial commenced in January 1982. He was able to afford a well-known defence lawyer by the name of Ivan Fisher, who was a lawyer to the stars. He proceeded to fight his defence that Abbott was a subject of the society and a product of his upbringing. The case of murder was dropped, and Abbott was charged with the lesser crime, manslaughter, and was given 15 years to life. Yet again, this man was being sent to prison. The family of Richard Aden made statements blaming many of the people who were involved, such as Norman Mailer. He then told a paper that this was a decision in his life that he would take no pride in. When Abbott was sentenced, the proceeds from his published book was put on hold, and the family of Richard Aden made a $10 million claim for damages. Abbott, who was a natural in court due to the amount of times he had been there, represented himself. He was allowed to question the widow. It has been said that he taunted the young wife and family of Richard Aden, making statements that he would never have made it as an actor anyway, also telling them how quickly he died after being stabbed, and making fun of her for showing feelings and crying. The court saw it in the Aden's favour and awarded them just shy of $8 million. Abbott thought that if one book could get him released from prison for murder, then maybe another one could. So he wrote and released a book. This one was not a bestseller. This one did not get him out of prison. But it did, however, find him love. A lady began to write to Abbott and wrote letters to many asking them to see the real Jack Abbott and not the monster the press had made out he was. But this fell upon deaf ears. Jack was to stay in prison for the rest of his life. And that is what happened, as in 2002, on February the 10th, Abbott was found dead in his cell. He had taken his own life, leaving a letter behind him, a letter which has never been published. His death has been disputed by his family, who thought Abbott would never take his own life. Many psychiatrists have seen and spoken to Abbott, and all have said the same. This man was a psychopath. He was not able to show any kind of empathy or remorse for the crimes he had committed. The question is, who is to blame for the release of Abbott? Was it his publisher? Was it the stars who fought for him? Or was it the prison system? Feel free to leave a comment, as we enjoy reading them. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories from Crime Busters.